or units in a limited partnership.
Can you talk about John Scully for a second?
I can talk about John all day. He's
right,
one of my best
I
friends.
met John Scully with you years ago, right after he had joined your board.
Yep.
How did you recruit John Scully? Did you pull a Steve Jobs on him, or how were you?
No.
John Scully was the CEO of Pepsi-Cola, who Steve Jobs recruited to run Apple back in the day.
Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or do you want to come with me and change the world?
Is that a true?
It is.
Is that how he pitched it?
It's absolutely true. In fact, John, we take a group of our investors and senior executives and clients down to the Masters every year. And John is so gracious. He comes every year and gives an unbelievable talk about kind of his life, which is, when he talks about Bill and Steve, he's talking about Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. It's very dear friends, obviously, with Bill Gates. Steve and him kind of up and down, up and down. But John tells an unbelievable story about how Steve had been recruiting him for months, and he did not want to leave. John was actually the youngest CEO in the history of Pepsi before he joined Apple. And he was the first MBA ever hired at Pepsi. So they had no training program at Pepsi. They actually had him driving a truck for his first 6 months, which was a very funny story because we had an employee who was down in Atlanta that we were interviewing for a job. She came over to the Masters to meet us, and we were going to spend some time with her that day, and she was going to head back. And she ended up staying. It was very communal. We had a lot of fun. She had a few drinks. And John had told this story to the group about driving a truck at Pepsi. So she looks at him, and I swear to God, she said, "So, do you still drive a truck?" She didn't get the job. But, been recruiting him for months and months. They ended up spending the day together in Manhattan, walked through the park, spent a lot of time during that day, and they ended up at Steve's new place on Fifth Avenue overlooking the park that was under construction. And that, on the top of that building, is where he said that to John after walking all day. And John kind of looked at him and said, yeah, I do. And he went over and joined him and took Apple from $700 million a year in sales to $12 billion a year in sales under John's leadership. Obviously, it's doing well now.
Very cool. How did you recruit John Scully? Did you have to pull a similar? What was your line?
John was on stage just like I am now. And as he walked off the stage at a YPO event, I kind of waited, and I walked up to him, and everybody was asking him business questions and all this stuff. And this movie had just come out called The Pirates of Silicon Alley, which I thought was fabulous at the time, and kind of was really cool. So I walked up to John, and I said, "So, what'd you think of The Pirates of Silicon Alley? Did you think the guy who played you portrayed you well?" And he looked at me, he stopped, because it was an out-of-the-box question. And he said, "No, but the guy who played Steve Jobs, which was Noah Wild, channeled him." He was like, that was him. And we ended up talking. And then that night, we ended up sitting next to each other at dinner, and I talked a little bit. I was running a company called Sterling Cellular at the time, which we owned and operated a lot of the Cellular One stores in Greater Washington, Baltimore. And I was selling that business to Southwestern Bell Mobile Systems, which actually became something, which is today AT&T. And as a part of that, I was starting this company to sell wireless phones over the internet called Infonic. And I talked to John about it. And he said, "Well, listen, the next time you're up in New York, why don't you just stop in and we'll talk?" And April's heard this story probably 1,000 times. We had very good reason to be up in New York the following week. Went in to meet with him and was supposed to get half an hour of his time. Literally spent 4.5 hours with him. This is now probably 12 years ago. John is now, if not my, certainly one of my closest friends. We vacation together. I stay at his homes. He stays with me. He's truly one of the most amazing men I've ever met.
Fantastic. Speaking of amazing, we have Michael here, Goldstein.
That's right.
And I definitely want to...
Michael, the man.